Okay, it is 5:02. I'm going to call the joint special meeting of the City Council and the Board of Directors of the Windcrest Economic Development Corporation meeting on January 23rd, 2019 to order. Looks like we're all here with the exception of Ms. Petrardi, who's on the way. And we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pray with me. God, thank you for this opportunity. May we make the best of it so that we might serve you and the citizens of Windcrest. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Okay, we are going to go in executive session first to relieve the attorneys of their billing cycle. But there are some things we need to take action on before we do that. And so what I want to do is go to item under resolutions, item number 2, the City Council review and take action on the resolution authorizing legal agreement to share information between the city and the WEDC where aligned in purpose and scope. And so we will, after we pass that, then I would ask the EDC to pass, looks like number 4 of the legal agreement. So I'm ready.
Mayor, Council, I propose a motion that City Council will review, discuss, and may take action on the resolution number 2019-686R, authorizing a legal agreement to share information between the city and the WEDC, which are aligned in purpose and scope.
Second.
To confirm, is that a motion to approve the resolution?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Turner moved that we approve resolution 2019-686, and Ms. Flick seconded that. Is there a discussion?
Mr. Mayor, are we permitted to be part of the discussion?
No, I don't think so. Are they?
It's up to you, Mayor.
You may, go ahead.
Okay, just a very minor thing here. I read this, and there's a couple of oversights maybe that need to be corrected, because once this is voted on and signed, it becomes a legal document as written, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and if we could just go to those about, I think there's 4 of them. On page 2 of 6, paragraph 2, the very last word is lawsuit. Everywhere else it says agreement. So I don't think we have a lawsuit. Does that need to be changed to the word agreement?
What section are you in?
Page 2 of 6, the second paragraph, the last word is lawsuit.
It's capitalized. Top of the page.
Should it be agreement? Everything else and it says agreement.
I actually don't think that matters one way or the other. But if you wish to make a motion that it be amended to clarify, that's perfectly fine.
I like to make a motion that the word lawsuit be amended to say agreement as it does everywhere else.
I think it actually should say in a lawsuit.
A lawsuit? Because it says in this lawsuit.
It's saying that no party shall be restricted from using its own materials or non-privileged materials if there is ever litigation.
Yeah, in a lawsuit.
In a lawsuit.
So change the word this to a.
That would be correct.
Okay.
That's one.
I guess parliamentary-wise.
Yeah, we'll get them all. I think somebody said
them all and approve.
The person who made the motion would need to amend the motion.
Yes, that's
okay.
good.
All right. Another one.
Page 3 of 6, section 13, second to the last sentence. Parties later becomes adverse. Remove the S from becomes for grammatical reasons. To become adverse to each other.
Yeah. Can you take the word S off on page 3?
Okay. Page 4 of 6, number 18, last word. Again, change the word this to a.
Where's this?
Number 18. Yeah, change the word this to a.
Lawsuit again.
And that's all I found.
All right, so I would ask Mr. Turner if you would amend your motion to make the following changes on page 2, replace this for A on page 3, make become singular, and on page 4, in number 18, change the word this to A. So would you amend your motion?
I do amend my motion.
Okay. You accept the second?
Yes.
Okay.
Point of order, for citizens to be allowed to speak on this?
No, they can later. Discussion. Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand.
City Council only,
City
correct?
Council only, sorry, thank you. Okay, I think that was 4-0, Mr. Majority's not here, so we are finished, so the EDC can now take action.
Okay, so I move that we consider and take action on a legal agreement to share information between the city and WEDC, which are aligned in purpose and scope.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? EDC only.
All right.
Opposed?
Okay, 5-0.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so the only one, the entire DC is here, and the entire council with the exception of Majority. Okay, it is 5:09. We will now go into an executive session. The EDC and the council will retire to the EDC trailer to have discussions regarding the EDC. So let me read the...
Mayor, can you read the section? We have to.
I just said read the...
Oh, okay.
I was getting there, thank you.
Yes.
City Council and WDC will convene in closed session as authorized by in 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, consult with legal counsel, and 551.071, 551.072, 551.087, consultation with legal counsel regarding real estate transactions, discussions regarding purchase, lease, or exchange of real property within the city of Windcrest, and economic development, redevelopment property. It is now 5:10. We'll be in recess. Okay, I have 7:10. We will bring the joint special meeting of the City Council and Board of Directors of WDC, or Windcrest Economic Development Corporation, on January 23rd back to order. We will now go into citizens to be heard. Citizens may address the City Council on board or Board of Directors on both topics not on the agenda for not more than 3 minutes. In addition, the foregoing citizens shall also have the opportunity to address either or both bodies during the consideration of posted agenda items for no more than 6 minutes. A city or WEDC official may make a statement of factual or specific factual information in response to an inquiry made by a member of the public, or recitation of existing policy in response to the inquiry made by a member of the public. Liz Dick.
Good evening, Council and EDC. Good to see y'all up here this evening. I just have a suggestion. I'm the committee chair for our Community Service Board of the Women's Club, and we bought a lot of bolts of ribbon to make bows at the light up, and we were over ambitious, so we have quite a bit of ribbon left. I'd like to donate those bows. We'll make the bows for the mailboxes for next year, and I'd like to see EDC maybe have a strand of lights for every household that would like one, and a bow for the mailbox. Let's get back to our roots. Thank you.
Thank you.
Veronica Dixon.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to talk about last Saturday, and I don't know how many of you were lucky enough to join us in the cold when we had the immunization clinic here. This is something we've done before in the past. We'll have another one in February. We do it in January and February because this is the time that your animals are supposed to be registered with the city of Windcrest. So we'll be back here in February again, the third Saturday, so we hope you all come out. And we really did have a good turnout, and I think we had between 18 and 20 animals registered with the city, besides animals from outside the city. So that's good for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Dotson.
I noticed on our agenda this evening that we had a new heading called Public Hearing instead of Citizens to be Heard, which is required by our charter. And I know that the council has received legal advice that it's fine to have citizens to be heard, and the state of Texas does not prohibit it. But already we have this change in our document, and I was curious how that happened. Being able to speak at the council meetings is an integral part of Windcrest, and it would be tragic to see it discontinued. Then the question has to be asked, when does an ordinance trump the charter? If there's a problem between the charter and an ordinance, change the ordinance to be in line with the charter. All the council would need to do is repeal ordinance, where is it? 2015-730, stopping the requirement for a 15-day notice for a public hearing, which the state only requires for planning and zoning public hearings. So it's not a requirement by the state that we have a 15-day public notice for any public hearings that we had.
The site map and other mobile device issues, since that was clearly as part of the contract. The City Plus rep did indicate she would refer our issues for design review, especially the search and the site map. As far as I know, Raphael, nothing has come back from them. There was a holiday in there. What is the status of the city's contract with Civic Plus? Did the city sign off and pay the bill? Is the contract considered complete? I requested a copy of the contract, and I think you did too. Did you get a copy of the contract? Okay, I did request a copy of the contract through the city site. I did not receive anything. There is, which it took me a while to wrap my mind around this, there's actually two company software controlling what you're putting on the website. You have the new design from Civic Plus, which has a calendar feature. Veronica's software controls the content and the streaming content viewer listing dates of meetings, which allows you to see the agenda, view meetings. Veronica's is not part of Civic Plus. It is another company. Our email notifications are part of Veronica's Civic Plus. I truly don't know. My guess is it's Civic Plus, but I don't know. Liz Dick is now a city employee and working to delete, unpublish, archive lots of very old content. Mobile responsiveness for the content of our site was not in the scope. In other words, they weren't going to be responsible for all the junk we left. And the site was last updated in 2005. Wow. So you can't expect a new design to clean up all the clutter that we've left around for years. Jennifer Newman of the EDC asked that I review training, and I intend to do that. Many questions remain. So far, I do not believe the city got a finished product. Thank you.
Rhonda Rowan.
Good evening. I'm representing the Planning and Zoning Committee. I'd like to invite you all to come to our Planning and Zoning meeting, which we're preparing in the near future. What we want to concentrate on is reviewing the current and past city master plans with a concentration on Walsham Road. Thank you.
That That's it for non-agenda items. For agenda items, we have Mary Lee Seal.
Hi, council. I'm a longtime resident of Windcrest, and I have heard that our police chief, Baloo, has been asked to resign, given no indication why, asked to resign or be fired, and that concerns me. And I would like the council to reconsider this action and consider reinstating Chief Baloo. Thank you.
Pamela Dotson.
These are agenda items, and the first one I'd like to address is under ordinances. It regards to number 1, the proposed charter amendments. And if you remember back in 2007, we were told that the major distinction between a general law city and a home rule city is that a general law city can only do what the legislature, through law, allows them to do. A home rule city, on the other hand, can pass any regulations or law it deems necessary unless the state law prohibits it. And that was from the Texas Municipal League. It seems strange that this is an agenda item when, as of yet, you have not had a public hearing about these attorney-proposed changes. They were just now available for public review as of last Friday, and with this volume of proposed changes the attorney has submitted, it seems to be a rush with very little time of review for the citizens. In the past, with the Citizen Charter Review Commission, the attorney was there to guide the citizens as they moved forward with amendments they deemed important. Now we are moving forward with suggested changes from an attorney with little to no input from the citizens. Is it possible to approve this ordinance, calling for the election in May, and indicating that that does not necessarily mean you're accepting the proposed amendments? I would think after the public hearings and citizen input, we may not decide to move forward on all of his proposed amendments. The other agenda item that I like to address is resolutions, and it's number 1. I don't even know how to start with this resolution. It's nothing but embarrassing to sit and try to read it. We've had 2 individuals who are here to work for the city and its residents. You just have to read the opening paragraph to know we have a problem here. At no time were the proposed tax rates presented as they are in these documents. This document and the proposition are not even anywhere near accurate. This is extremely troubling. What is happening in City Hall that this kind of error is posted and presented as a legitimate document? This discussion has always been about a 1/4 cent, not percent, cent. And that of the 2 cents, not percent, cents, the city receives in sales tax. My presentations that I've given have always been about reducing the EDC 1/4 cent to 1/8 cent and giving the other 1/8 cent to the street and maintenance tax, not to the general fund that already gets 1 full cent from the sales tax plus additional 1/4 cent called an ad valorem offset. That all goes into the general fund. So they're reaping benefits from our sales tax already. I don't want to add to them. I want to add to our street maintenance tax, so those funds will be restricted for street maintenance use only. And I have to say that the city manager has yet to present a proposed budget to any council where any substantial amount of money from the general fund was to be used for street repair. Why would there be any good reasoning to even consider giving him monies to use elsewhere? The whole purpose of this idea was to increase the monies to improve our streets. One has to wonder, after having this agenda item so many times presented to the council, that these individuals still cannot get it right. Again, this agenda item and its resolution was embarrassing to me. And by the way, it's stated in the agenda that was the first reading of the resolution. Well, resolutions only require one reading. It's ordinances that require second reading. if you move forward on this agenda item this evening, I would hope that you would amend the errors that are within the document, and that you would definitely not give those funds to our general fund, who already receives a substantial amount of our sales tax, and identify it for it to be used for our streets only. Thank you.
Kim Wright.
Everyone. On tonight's agenda, it states in blue wording that a citizens to be heard is to be included, but it's listed as a public hearing. A public hearing by ordinance 2015-730 passed at the August 3rd, 2015 meeting shall be published one time in the designated official newspaper of the city at least 15 days in advance of the hearing. This agenda complies with state law for posting notice, but is in violation of our charter, section 3.1, requiring posted agendas to provide for citizens to be heard, and ordinance 2015-730 requiring 15 days publication. And that's my first agenda thing. For the second agenda item, for the fiscal year 2017-18, the WEDC had a total revenue of approximately $578,000 and about $258,000 for expenses. The fiscal year 2018-19 WEDC budget is $349,000 with projected expenses of $348,000. Why have the expenses increased by $90,000? What are the citizens getting for their money? Since fiscal year 2015-16, the legal fees have more than doubled from $22,000 to $50,000. Travel expenses have increased from $10,000 to $18,000. Computer maintenance has doubled to $4,000. Website maintenance has more than doubled to $2,000. And a new item has been added, public relation fees of $10,000. What is that? Of the proposed expenses, only $43,000 is directly dedicated to EDC projects. That's only 12% of the requested budget. Plus, the WEDC will have a projected fund balance in September of approximately $572,000. If the citizens vote to reduce the EDC's quarter-cent to 8 cents, then the WEDC revenue would be just under $300,000. Trimming expenses and or using some of the EDC's $572,000 fund balance would allow them to promote Windcrest and to fulfill their $43,000 for projects. An 8 cent tax transferred from the EDC to street maintenance fund would provide nearly $1 million per year for the streets, a win-win situation. The EDC can only fix streets within the business district. How does that help the curb appeal of selling your home? Thank you.
That's all for agenda items. There's nobody else.
Okay, then we'll go on to item number 3, which is WEC reports in action. All right. Oh.
Mayor, City Council, Madam President, and WEC board members. Let me give you a quick, if you put the slides up, please, Marie, a quick overview of where we are, where we came from, so to speak. I'll try to make it brief since the agenda's very, very long. Pardon me?
I don't have the slides on the system.
You don't have the slides on the system? Okay. All right, then let me wing it here. You have a copy, and I'm sorry that the audience won't be able to follow along, but I have a copy of the slides. I think everybody's in their packages, they do, just the audience that can't. Okay. So if you can follow me along in your packet. The first page is simply about what we are. Enabling legislation goes back to '79. The primary local government code, the chapters that are listed there. The fact that a quarter of 1 cent sales tax is generating, round figures, about $500,000, and that we currently have 2 employees. One is 30 hours a week. I put in as a consultant about 18 hours a week. So just a quick summary there. The next one is just talking about a little history, and obviously you can't talk about company locations, past projects without highlighting rat space, even with the troubles that came with that project. It was an outstanding, nationwide recognized economic development project. And others like the Holiday Inn, others you see more recently, In-N-Out Burger, the U.S. Auto Force, Haflin, all of those are over the last few years. What I did on the third page was give you more recent success on activities. Obviously, the wash tub opening and working with that $2 million investment. The Tokyo Express is getting close to that. On the commercial and distribution side, some outstanding companies have come to Windcrest in the last 12 to 18 months. Nexus, IT company, communications company, Ferguson, Burrell, Green Tech, CEDC. Green Tech is also a technology company, solar energy company, and Crane Payments Innovation, also a very significant back office operations. I'd also mention the expansions and relocations and renovations that have occurred over the last 12 to 18 months. The Starbucks, the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the Drury Inn, and of course the Whataburger building their new facility. What I wanted to touch on the next page was just current, and I have it listed as current economic development activities. It's really about our ongoing right now agenda and what the board is prioritizing as far as going forward. Obviously, we talked about in executive session the importance of rack space and clarification on the MEIA. Also want to highlight the fact that the most important project we got working right now is the Four Winds buildings and making sure that those are a success with the new ownership and renovation to bring hundreds of new jobs in IT and other types of back office operations. I also mentioned the Eisenhower Point Business Park that's doing so well. It's allowing us to work with the companies that I rattled off a few minutes ago. A lot of outstanding companies have come to that development, and there'll be more. The senior living project is something that is in a gray area now, but something that as we discussed, is of importance to the community that needs to be fully vetted. I'll mention that our emphasis under the leadership of this board is going to be business retention and expansion, and working with the local companies to make sure that we're meeting their needs and providing the assistance we can. I'll mention the Eisenhower development one more time because of the final two buildings of that development will be under construction soon. So you'll have buildings 1 through 7 have been completed, and 8 and 9 will soon be under construction. And then current activity is very good. A couple that have been discussed in public, the Smoothie King taking over the church's building, and then the AALF project as part of HBS Global that we're still working with and hoping that this first quarter we get a positive result from them as far as selection of Windcrest over Houston and Laredo. Finally, on the last page, I went ahead and listed some of the challenges that we've come up with as a board and myself. We feel like our focus on increasing Windcrest sales tax and property tax revenues is a key mission for our organization. We know that improving infrastructure, particularly streets, and tying it to economic development is a direction that will help the community. We believe that we need to look at incentives provided to those IT and back office operations that I mentioned that will help us bring those higher level payrolls and help us increase those sales tax. The board is very focused on looking at the commercial corridor revitalization, in particular the Walton Street and what can we do there in the economic development process to aid that area that It is a little older retail buildings and operations, but still has a very good occupancy rate and still is a very important aspect of revenue being generated for the city. I mentioned the retention of the Iraq Space Headquarters, and then also I mentioned the solidification of institutionalizing the BRE program. So very quickly, that is a summary of where we are and the direction, part of the direction that the new board is considering. Any comments or questions?
What's BREs?
I'm sorry. I thought I said that in my rush. It's business, local business, it's business retention and expansion. So it's the part of economic development where you keep what you already have, which is so important in our business.
And is AALF the initials of the company?
Yes, it is.
Does it stand for anything?
No, it's an international company that we're working with on that.
Thank you.
Another key point of BRE is expansion, because if they're more successful, we get more.
Yes, sir.
Microphone, please.
Very much so, the expansion part, I mean, we want to see these companies renovate. That sends a message that they like Windcrest, that they're making money here. We also want to see them grow, got jobs and that payroll.
Are you able to name the IT company yet going into Four Winds, or?
Well, not
like I need this. Or is that
no, that's something where, and I didn't mean to mislead you. The IT, the AALF company that's part of HBS Global is not going to go into Four Winds. They're actually going to go into a 200,000 new building, 200,000 square foot new building on Eisenhower in Windcrest.
Okay,
So
that's what I thought we talked about before. So
Yes, ma'am.
I wasn't-
Yeah, right. So I'm sorry if you know, we're working with the new ownership that the WDC brought in to buy those two Four Winds buildings to structure a marketing campaign to go after IT companies and back office operations. They're still in the process right now of accepting bids for the $7 million renovation of Building 1.
Okay, are you able to? That doesn't sound like it's a. Are you able to name the IT company going in on Eisenhower yet, or?
No, we're going to wait till they make firm commitment on that before we share more detail.
Quick Trip?
Quick Trip is, the manager probably tell you more about where they are on plans, but I think they're ready to go, aren't they?
Pretty much from the Quick Trip point of view, they should start construction anytime soon. They were just waiting on the city of San Antonio utilities to give them some confirmation. Everything related to the planning and zoning and permits has been done from our side.
Ahead of schedule.
Actually, they are.
Very much.
But they're just waiting on San Antonio so they can start construction.
I don't know if you're going to stay up here. We had some other items.
Oh, yes.
Briefing discussion on the Windcrest master plan.
I'm not sure I'm the person to address the master plan there, but I will make some comments.
I'm just calling your names on here now.
I know, yes, sir. The ordinance related to this master plan was passed in 2015, and it was it's really a very short statement about the three general areas, and let me make sure I get these correct here. They were talking about the economic development, the community, and one other area that I forget. But my point is that it wasn't an extensive plan. It was just focused on certain areas and then some bullet points on each one, and it's not a lot of detail in that. So I know it's something that my board and Jennifer have been talking about the planning function and what role the WEDC may play in that. So I thought we might open it up. And the other area was growth management. the master plan had 3 areas. Let me repeat that for everybody. The focus was growth management, economic development, and community identity is the way it was stated. And it was just a 3-page summary of what, focus should be under on those particular topics. And our thought was, let's just put it out there, and I know you had the same thought, Mayor, that see what we can do together.
Well, I think one of the newest members of the planning and zoning spoke to us, some citizens that we heard, and said that that was part of what that her focus would be. So clearly I think and you've seen it too. The master plan that was produced is not real specific, and we need some more specifics. And so we will encourage. And obviously, I'm encouraged by the person who came up to speak tonight that planning and zoning will get together and begin that process. I think that we need a new, a better updated master plan.
And we plan to work with planning and zoning, we intend to work with planning and zoning.
I don't know that those are working.
You sound just the same.
I think it recorded.
I sound the same.
No, that is better.
Get right up on that. Anyway, so yeah, we've had discussions and we plan to work together on the city master plan.
All right. Discussion on street improvement projects.
Okay, and I lost my attorney, so I'm going to do this.
All right.
The point is this. First of all, through Jennifer's leadership, the board is looking hard at how do we participate in infrastructure that's economic development related. And that's a very important way to say it, because under the local government code, specifically chapter 505, you've got to tie it to economic development, and I'll do it broadly here. It's either got to be tied to a community recreational facility, or it's got to be tied to primary jobs, or it's got to be tied to a business development effort. And those are the 3 broad categories that allow you to spend money on infrastructure / streets if you can make the case that it's directly tied to that. For example, the case was made by the city and the WEDC that the Holiday Inn Express fit under this particular law that allows you to do that project because of the need for rack space, who has the primary jobs in the community, to their need for more space for their visitors. The inflow of visitors, corporate visitors and their affiliates that come in needed that kind of space, so you were able, just before my time, to make a case for that. And that's the kinds of things that need to happen. I don't think, not speaking for the leadership, but let
I can pick up from there. So the WEDC did set up a streets committee consisting of myself and Mr. Stimson, and we looked at the streets committee work that was already done by the city's committee that identified streets that needed to be done. And we did an evaluation of that report. We selected 3 streets that we believed would fit what we are able to do. And we are currently building a proposal that will go to our WEDC board as a whole for them to vote on it. Obviously, it'll go through Joe Hoffer and Mario to make sure that the novices here got the right streets selected. But we have looked at it, we've selected projects, and at our February 23rd meeting, Rip and I will present those projects to the WEDC board for their consideration. So that's where we are on it.
Perfect. Any more questions for Mr. Hernandez? Yeah, I think you're done, because I think the last thing was what we already did, which was.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you. Okay, ordinances. City Council review, discuss, may take action on ordinance number 2019-6890, ordering a special election to be held on May the 4th, 2019, on proposed charter amendments. Is Ryan here?
Yeah, I'm here. This is the ordinance that adopts the attachment with the propositions of what you can take, would eventually be in the ballot. Since it's 2 readings and we have public hearings set in between now and when the ordinance is finally adopted, we can take input and adjust anything that we need to adjust. I do need to note that there is on attachment 1 that exists right now for Proposition 1, the word standards needs to be corrected. Is there any motion on that? We need to do a motion with that amendment. That's the word standards needs to be corrected on both the header of Proposition 1 and on the ballot language on Proposition 1.
So would it be appropriate for us to then consider each of the propositions and then, or
yes, certainly
at this time? So
yes, sir.
we could make a motion on each of the propositions with any changes, or choose not.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other thing I want to make sure we're aware of, because we did ask for citizens to communicate to us what they thought was important for this, for cleaning up, for lack of a better word, the charter. We will have and can have a charter commission to complete complete any other items, but we did believe, and I think we're on the right track, to try to make this as efficient as possible. At this point, ask our attorney to give us some suggestions. He has taken our suggestions. He has taken the suggestions from us that we got from citizens. And so why don't we just begin with Proposition 1 and go through them.
Let me pull it up there, sir. Proposition 1, Proposition 1 and 2 were kind of primary targets that I was asked to look at. Proposition 1, it clarifies the procedure. It actually adds more due process elements when you're dealing with complaints that are filed against city officials, in particular the city council. It utilizes the wording out of state law. It breaks up kind of the initiative and referendum sections. They go into number 2. It adds a lot of stuff to the hearings, but that protects both the council member and the one that is bringing a complaint. Whenever you have a complaint of this nature, there's aspects that have to be protected on both sides, both the council member and the one complaining, and the procedures are kind of designed to work around that and make the hearing more uniform. The problems that have occurred in the past that I had noted was there was no guidance. There really wasn't a lot of procedure spelled out for it, and so a lot of these sections were taken from different charters, ethics commission rules, different sections from around the state that I've either seen, used, or that was involved in a lawsuit and was kind of upheld. So this section is really designed to try to clean up and make it fair but balanced with regard to complaints against the council. It allows investigation and ethics standards to kind of be applied. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing the charter review, charters are kind of tricky things. They are your constitution, and so essentially they give you the powers that you're allowed to use and trigger it. That doesn't mean you do use and trigger them. You can control things through ordinances, and you can control different things through policy adjustments. There are certain things that just really don't belong in the charter because they have to be able to adapt to changes in circumstances, and so those are what go to ordinances. So the charter was, these suggestions were designed to try and balance that aspect, but still allow you the ability to make adjustments when necessary, but still mandating that complaints go forward, that there's a clear process, that people know what to expect, they know what the expectations are managed. It allows you to fill different vacancies in the process. process, and it adds a little bit of clarity with regard to your investigative powers. And that's basically what Proposition 1 does. I would like to clarify, if I might, Mayor, two things. Number one, what you have in front of you are the proposals from a legal perspective, which is what my instructions were. This is strictly from a legal perspective. Voters have to vote on this, and so you have to factor in a community perspective and community appeal as to what it is you want to, what the voters ultimately want to end up adopting. They're the ones that adopt it. So each of the proposals was designed in a way that you could, not go forward with it. You could pop it out, and it doesn't affect any of the other propositions. Sometimes when you do it, the propositions kind of intertwine. And I tried to avoid that, which this would allow you to pick certain ones and not pick certain ones. Whichever ones you pick, you're going to be good with just those. The second thing is I need to apologize for some confusion that may have been caused. I did a red line draft. Very original red line draft was based off the charter that I've been provided with regard to focusing on some of those things. That one was actually the 2010 charter. It was not the 2015 charter. Now, luckily, most of the changes that are made didn't change from 2010 to 2015, or they didn't change significantly, or they changed section numbers. So what that does is, if you're looking at a section number, it looks like the section has been completely replaced. When in fact, if you use the right section number, you realize only 2 words have been replaced. But what you have in front of you right now is, in fact, the adjustments to the 2015 chart.
Thank you, Ryan. Councilman? Would you like to move forward on Proposition 1? Or
So if we have questions related to definitions,
Yes,
ought
ma'am.
those be included in, should we look for those to be included inside the proposal?
Those are actually taken straight up. You're talking about 3.08?
No, I'm talking about the definition for, under, 3.08A.
Yeah.
One.
That wording is taken directly out of state law. But again, what you do is you adopt kind of the broad aspect of it, and for further definition as to what you're going to hold yourselves to, you can adopt restrictions and ordinances. I've seen that been done through specific ethics ordinances that you want to say, when we say incompetence, we mean X. And that allows you to define it for your purpose. It's easier to adjust if there's changes in circumstances over time or if state law changes. That's why you can actually talk about it in ordinances. It's up to you if you want to pull that one back and redo it, but my recommendation is that language is right out of state law, which I know is not always helpful and guidance as to what some of those words mean. But the easiest, most efficient way to take care of that is once you adopt it, you actually address it in an ordinance.
Toward the end, under disaster, when council members would get together, including board chairs,
Yes, ma'am.
it seems like a word's missing. It says about the middle of the paragraph, in numbers sufficient to constitute an interim city council shall constitute a quorum or be a quorum. Seems like there's something
Which
missing.
no, that's a 3.09 paragraph.
Paragraph D.
Well, basically what this says, And if you want to add a word, shall constitute a quorum, and, you know, that phrase, that's perfectly fine. But what this essentially says is the, in order of succession, this is the group that's assigned, and it's in numbers sufficient to constitute a quorum if you look after 3. So it's listed there. The wording is very similar to what was already there, so I didn't try and fiddle with it too much. But there was no statement of succession. And so by doing it with 1, 2, and 3, what that does, the words that were changed, what that does is it says this is the succession you use until you get enough to constitute a quorum or interim quorum so that they can actually act within 15 days. Am I answering your question, or are you asking a different question?
Under 3, I think what she's saying is under D3, there's a word missing between shall and quorum.
Right. I see, all right.
So it would be
Shall
constitute.
Got it. We can add that.
That's all the questions.
Okay. Anybody else? Would the council like to take action on Proposition 1? I think the, Ryan, thought it would be appropriate just to do these one at a time, right?
Yes.
So let's act on Proposition 1 or not.
So I move for approval for Proposition 1, shall sections 3.07, 3.08, 3.09, 3.12, and 10.3 of the city charter be amended to clarify the ethical standards imposed upon council members, change the procedure for considering complaints against council members, investigations into complaints, removal from office for members of the city council, and filling vacancies on the city council.
A second.
Okay, with the understanding that the change would be, the word standard would be corrected. The,
Whatever word.
And constitute.
and shall constitute on under D.
Under D3. Yes, sir. Is that correct?
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Archuleta, you seconded?
Yes.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Approved.
I have a question, please. Are we approving these proposed amendments because we have not had a public hearing on these?
They can be changed.
And
I think that's what Ryan said.
okay,
So we're.
okay. I
we're
just want to
taking-
I
yeah,
just
no,
want to
I-
make sure we're doing it the proper
So
procedure.
just to be clear, we're approving these now, they can be changed.
Yes, you're approving them now because your ordinance has to be read twice.
Right.
You're not actually adopting the ordinance yet. So you're approving it for what will go forward for the first reading into the second reading for approval, and the citizens have the ability to make comments, and we can change them at the second reading for you to decide what actually goes on the ballot.
Okay, any other discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor for Proposition 1 with the changes made, raise your right hand. Okay, that's, there she is, I can't see. I couldn't see it. All right, that's 5-0, thank you, council. Proposition 2.
Proposition 2 essentially breaks up and makes it clear for your procedures, again, the difference between an initiative and a referendum and a recall. The recall language last time also lacked some procedural specificity. It also required, or didn't actually require a lot of checks and balances that you normally would have. The thing about recalls, now, any citizen-initiated legislation, which all of 3 of these qualify. State law has certain restrictions on them about what you can make people do in the petition. And so this was kind of a balance between allowing citizens the ability to initiate the legislation, whether it's a recall or initiative or referendum, but holding some accountability that wouldn't necessarily invalidate the petition, but it would allow the council to hold some accountability if there is any fraud or deceit or anything like that with regard to submitting the petition. again, it also adjusts the due process requirements for both letting the citizens get their stuff on and the council members that are subject to recall. There's not a lot of due process with regard to initiative or referendum. That's just citizens want either to pass an ordinance or they want you to repeal an ordinance. So that's basically what these are. It adds the oath for the petition in order to kind of help assert the enforcement action against it, but that doesn't invalidate the petition. That just allows enforcement action if individuals are found to later have been performing something improperly.
Okay, in addition to accountability, I think as I read it, you also clarified the language as to what the 25% was.
Yes, sir. We had a problem with that, so we changed it. Yes, sir.
And I also note on 704.4 that you removed the language that said public hearing and called it a special meeting. Is there some reason? Can you help us with that?
Well, when you're having the meeting and you're going to take action on, that's not necessarily a public hearing. Okay. And you don't want to confuse the words public hearing with the fact you're having a meeting you're going to make a decision on in public. And it's basically the hearing that you're having or the meeting that you're having is to go through the process that you're supposed to, and that has to be public, so you can't keep going back and forth into executive session. That's really the main reason for the change. It would be appropriate if you called it, you noted that there was a public hearing instead of a special hearing or a special meeting. However, then that causes confusion with the normal special or public hearing that citizens are used to seeing when they get up and they talk about things that are on the agenda. So that was really the primary reason for that change.
And I'm noting also, though, that part of the discussion we've had in the past is if you call it a public hearing, we have to post it. In this scenario, do we have to post it in the paper and do the, based on the language that you have? Can we just?
Based on the language that I have, no, you don't post it in the paper.
All right. Council.
I've got a couple of comments based on experience. I like to have these two phrases in there. Must be, recall petition must be factual and substantiated allegations, not in violation of the law. There's been times where there's been stuff there unsubstantiated, and it's not fair for anybody in the city.
Do you have a place you'd add that?
I'd have to ask Les Delore, there's a couple of places, but let me finish first.
Okay.
Okay. The second part would be malicious, unfounded allegations will result in a Class C misdemeanor. I feel strong about those two, and I think those should be included. And I'll ask our attorney where he would include those best.
The one on factual and substantiated, on violation of law, probably needs to go up in the section regarding the form and submission. You can put that in there. Legally, it's more of a legislative decision or legislative action. So they probably aren't going to have quite the effect that you would like them to, but it doesn't hurt to put them in there, and they will have an effect. The one on the maliciousness.
Malicious, unfounded allegations.
Yes. The charter isn't the place for that. That's where the ordinance of enforcement comes in.
Okay, so we need an ordinance.
You need an ordinance after, just don't put it in the charter.
Got it.
I'm on, I guess, 7.04.1. Would that be where you would potentially add, since the basis for recall shall be specifically stated in the petition?
Yes, sir, that's exactly where it would go. So we go.
So does Frank need to make a motion to amend it to say that?
Yes, you can make a motion, or if you make a motion to adopt it, you adopt it with that as an amendment.
I'd like to adopt this, Proposition 2, motion to adopt Proposition 2 with my, amendment to read the petition recall must be factual and substantiated allegations, not in violation of the law.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Archuleta made a motion, Mr. Pedrati seconded, discussion. All those in favor? Oh,
Yes, so when we talk about factual and malicious and determining or fixing, Class C, or Class A, B, C, or D misdemeanors or whatever the crime is, how will that be determined? And by who?
Well, a criminal matter, it has to be prosecuted by, a state attorney.
So in other words, a court action and.
Yes. Yeah,
You know,
that's.
We're not
parties
considering that
are-
second part, though. It has to be an ordinance. We're only doing the first part.
Yeah, we're not doing the malicious
Not
stuff,
doing
just
the
the
malicious.
factual
All right.
sufficiency.
other questions? Council, all those.
Wait a second.
There's a typo, the spelling of the word council in the proposition two.
Where at, ma'am?
City council proposition two.
In the heading,
In the heading.
members of the city council.
There you go.
Oh,
Two
front
L's.
and middle.
Why is that a difficult word?
Okay.
I know, a lot of people have a problem with it.
So I assume, Mr. Archuleta, you accept that change? Mr. Pedrati, you accept that change?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, so it's moved and seconded that we pass Proposition 2 with the changes as noted. Any other questions? All those in favor, raise your right hand. So I vote thank you, council. Proposition 3. I think they get shorter.
Yeah, they get shorter, don't they? Proposition 3 changes some aspects that I mentioned in the beginning. What this does is it removes administrative language that's attached to the mayor, which has caused some problems and confusions in the past, and places them onto the city manager. The city manager, you have a city manager council form of government. The way that is supposed to be set up is the council makes the laws, you make the policy, the city manager executes. The mayor usually doesn't execute, and the council usually doesn't execute. The only thing the council usually executes on is hiring and firing the city manager. That's kind of where you're. And so this just didn't kind of come out of the blue. I've done litigation for Windcrest in the past and legal consultation before I became the city attorney, and usually I didn't get brought in until the you-know-what had already hit the fan. Yeah. And so these come from experiences I've had defending Windcrest where this type of language has become a problem for one legal reason or another. And so normally what you want to do is you want to separate the council's policy actions from the administrative actions that are performed by the city manager. That includes the powers that the mayor has that have to go to the city manager. That includes the power that council has regarding certain appointments, because those need to be given to the city manager. And so Proposition 2 removes some of that language. It removes the language about the mayor being the governmental or administrative head, the ceremonial head, but
I did tell him about that, by the way. I said, why can't I be the government head anymore? You have to be the ceremonial head.
Well, we know that you're more than a pretty face, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, is that out loud?
So, I mean, you run the meetings, you handle things presented to the council.
I'm okay with the ceremony.
Yes, sir. And it basically finishes that separation. Windcrest went from a general law city, which is a mayor council form of government, to a home rule city with a city manager council form of government. But when the citizens were doing the adoption of the charter, you kind of went halfway and got stuck in the middle, because you gave the mayor certain administrative powers It normally would go to the city manager. And so this is really proposed for you to gotta go one way or the other. You know, that's where this one is coming from.
So which way are you leaning on this?
I'm leaning that the city manager have more direct, the administrative abilities. You guys do all policy decisions. You control things through him.
So basically, we're gonna become the legislative branch we're supposed to become.
Yes.
And let the city manager, and let's clarify this, I think it's really important. We're not talking,
She's loud.
okay, we're not talking people, we're talking job descriptions. So we are gonna take the personalities out of this. The city manager is gonna run the city, and the mayor's gonna be the mayor. And it's not, you know, Dan Reese. It's whoever's the mayor, this is their job, and whoever's the city manager, this is their job.
And for the record, I support that.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, okay, that's that, but I do got a couple of things here.
Yes, sir.
On this here, I really feel strongly that it says, designating the city council as the direct supervisor of the city manager. That's just, to me, not a good idea. When you have you've had a divided council, you know, one says this, and the other says that, what does that poor city manager do when you have a divided council? You got 5 bosses, they're all, we're gonna say this, place 1 telling me this and place 2 telling me that. That's just not good management. It needs to be managed by 1 person, not 5 councilmen. So, I think it should be the mayor that does that. I mean, there's only one, he needs to take directions from 1 person. The mayor can get with the council and say what you think, but in the end, he needs to have 1 supervisor, not 5 people telling him 5 different things. So agree with me or not, but that's it.
Can you help us with the way other cities are set up? I'm guessing, and I don't know this for a fact, that San Antonio's probably set up like this, where the city manager works for the city council. I don't know if that's true or not.
The city manager technically has the boss of however much constitutes a quorum.
And I will also tell you, part of the discussions we had earlier had to do with evaluations. And my research with other cities was, literally, it was a form that the city council did on their, I mean, they got together, but the evaluation was done by the city council. And I understand your concept, and I agree with.
Are you saying they all got together and did 1 evaluation?
No, they each provided an input, and then the council decided how to proceed.
Okay, well, then that needs to say operated by, the word quorum needs to be in there.
I would
If
assume
that's what
that
you're saying,
that's
that's
given.
what-
I guess my point would be
I mean, if he's told to do 2 or 3 things, he needs to take whatever the quorum is, and that needs to put in there. Don't you agree to that?
I don't think he should opt.
What are you gonna do if you're city manager and you have 5 people tell you to do 5 things?
We should be giving him direction as a body.
He's not supposed to take
And so the body gives direction to, if the body decided to do something, and then I walked over to the city manager and said, yeah, I don't want you to do that. You work for me, so I want you to do something else. That would be highly inappropriate. And so the
only time we need to tell him to do something, we'll come here, and then we all have to.
We give him direction to run the city. He either runs the city or he doesn't. If he doesn't run the city, we find another city manager.
Yeah, I just don't like the.
Well, I think Frank, what?
The city council member.
Yeah, right, exactly, the council. And I think what Ryan said and what I had said before is that this isn't personalities. And we're hiring a city manager to run the city. If something comes up, say the city manager isn't running the city, or the city manager does something that we don't think is within his ability or within his responsibilities, then as a council, we can come together and say, don't do that anymore, city manager. So it's getting out, and I think the important thing is, what we're saying is, we're gonna get out of the day-to-day running of the city. That's the whole point. That's not the job of the council, it's the job of a good city manager.
And the other thing I would add is that the mayor, whoever that might be, couldn't fire the city manager if he or she wanted to. So the council would have to take those actions anyway.
Frank, in 5.02, it does say that the city council shall supervise
I
the
just-
city
yeah, I
manager
just
by
seen that.
majority vote.
I just seen that, that's why I shut up.
Hearing none, all right.
The other thing here is that, it says, people's gonna get tired, which are elected for 1 year after leaving office. I think. it
Yeah, you
says
can't,
here-
you can't be city manager if you just tell them. no
Well,
problem.
but I'm thinking here, it says the same thing on,
Oh, right here.
proposition, yeah, this other proposition says 3 years.
Right, yeah, there is a disconnect between this and
So
Proposition
either we
6.
do it, yeah, it says 3 years on another proposition, proposition 6. Second paragraph, second line, paragraph B says they have 3 years, and up here we're saying 1 year, so are we gonna make it 1 or are we gonna make it 3?
That's up to you. Tell me what you want there, that's what we'll put there.
Compromise 2.
I don't wanna know how they make the sausage.
Okay. We just need to change it,
One or the other, or in something different, you're right.
yeah, so, what's your feeling? 2.
So.
1.5.
Yeah. So I got a suggestion. Maybe if we, have a motion to, I don't think we use the term table, proposition 3 through 15, go back, have our workshop, go through this thing from muzzle to butt plate, make some adjustments, have the citizens have an opportunity to provide whatever input that they have, and then we come back and start at 3 and go through this thing.
Well, I think we're here now, if we flush some of this out, it just flush more
Yeah,
stuff out
but
now.
like Joan said, we're making sausage right now.
But,
Well, I will
but
say
as
this.
Joan said, we don't wanna run out of time, because this is what what we're dealing with. If we don't pass this, at least do the first reading tonight, and then something happens down the road, we're not gonna meet our deadline, and we're not gonna be able to do anything, and we don't want that to
And
happen.
we can make changes later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
And they do get shorter.
I mean, we just need to
All right.
get through this.
okay, we're gonna make this,
Let's go then.
1 or 2 years.
1,
Okay, 1 year, I agree. Now,
make the motion.
So-
Or are we finished?
No, I'm not
Oh, you're not
finished.
done yet?
I'm not
Okay.
finished. Okay. And it says here on the bottom paragraph, it says city manager at the direction and supervision to exercise power with respect to subordinates. And it says basically you can hire everybody, but I like to do is put subject to the approval of council.
No, the whole idea is to get away from the council approving everything.
Not subject, if you like it, fine, if not,
I believe this is what it says right now. I
yes.
don't think that's a change. I mean, I think the current, I don't think you changed that word, did you?
I don't believe so, yeah.
All right.
I need to look at my.
Okay.
Well, I try to make comments over.
Okay, and I guess the last one would be, last page there, we have K, L, M, and N, and then I like to add M, like Mike. Implement,
O. M-N-O.
oh, it has an M up there, N, N, O.
There's an N, yeah.
And B, C, D.
Oh. Oh, is implement and oversee policies crafted by the city council. Implement and oversee policies crafted by the city council, like to add that on there. Implement and oversee policies crafted by city council.
Oh, implement and
Oh,
oversee policies
yes.
crafted by the city council.
Yes, yes,
Oh.
I got all this crossed up, can't read it. Implement and oversee policies crafted by the city council. That's all, folks.
Was that in the form of a motion?
Yeah, if you made that we do all that stuff. Then I will make a motion that we accept Proposition 3 with the suggested changes. So it's a year and implement and oversee policies. Oh.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Pedrati and seconded by Mr. Turner, that we accept Proposition 3 with the addition of O, implement and oversee policy crafted by the city council. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. You in favor?
No.
Okay, all opposed? Okay, I thought we got everything, well, never mind, I'm gonna go forward. Proposition 4.
Proposition 4, it basically, it cleans up some language. In the 2015 charter, you actually listed the places, but I put them kind of at the beginning. It's the power of the council, it's kind of tied to what the council can do versus what the city manager can do, and so it removed some of those administrative things that you were doing and made it clear, you make the policies, you make the ordinances, he's the one that enforces them. Also, it qualifies the definition of quorum by adding the fact that in certain circumstances, your quorum number by state law is considered differently. For example, when you canvass an election, your quorum by state law is defined differently. And so what this does is it allows that definition without you causing a charter preemption problem. And I clarified the section on making sure the citizens to be heard provision is always on the agenda and exactly where it's supposed to go for its procedural elements. The thing about a citizens to be heard, when you allow a citizen to be heard to speak on an item that is on an agenda, that's legally defined as a public hearing. But you guys haven't treated it like that. And so I'm trying to clean up some of that language to make it clear kind of when the citizens are you know, entitled to talk under the charter, and then when you're having your public hearings, kind of how they're supposed to proceed.
I got a couple of comments. Paragraph B, we need to change the 3 to a 1 to be congruent with our other one.
Where are we at?
Paragraph B.
3.08, 3.085B. Oh, you're on the wrong proposition. We're on 4.
We're on 4.
Oh, okay.
So, let me, can I just ask Ryan a question here?
You need to be on the mic.
Shouldn't we be making the motion, getting it seconded, and then having these discussions about the changes that people want to make? Wouldn't that be the right way to do it?
Parliamentary wise, yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Then I'm gonna move that we accept Proposition 4.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there a discussion?
Here you go.
Hearing none, it's been moved and seconded, we accept Proposition 4. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Thank you, Council, that's 5-0. Proposition 5.
State law and the Texas Constitution have certain restrictions on when a city can indemnify one of its officers. Your charter didn't help the way it was previously worded with regard to when you have the ability to do that. Now, this does not mean you have automatic authority to indemnify anybody for anything. What this means is you have the ability to pass an ordinance that kind of clarifies your indemnification provisions. You had previously given me instructions to adjust your indemnification ordinance to make it clear when things are supposed to be indemnified and the proper procedures. This kind of goes along with those instructions to clean up and confirm your power for indemnification.
I move that we adopt Proposition 5 as written.
A second.
Mrs. Strzelecki and Mr. Turner have moved and seconded. Strzelecki. Moved and seconded that we approve Proposition 5. All those in favor, say aye. That's 5 vote. Thank you, council. 6. This was the one that conflicted with the other.
Yes, sir. So basically, 3.085B, in the second sentence, but on second line of B, change until 3 years after the expiration to until 1 year after the expiration, so that it is consistent with the proposition you've already approved to move forward. What this one is, it goes along with the recall and the removal propositions, but it can be parsed out. It doesn't have to be there, and it can actually exist on its own. So that's why it's a separate proposition. What this is a collection of different clarifying prohibitions for council. So you kind of know what your roles are, and honestly, I've seen this kind of language used more when you have, excuse my terminology for it, a rogue council member that just kind of wants to go off and is being extreme with regard to what they feel they should do. But this makes it clear. Sometimes when there isn't a definition, there isn't guidance, there aren't rules that you know you're supposed to follow, there's no management of expectations, it causes confusion. This also makes it clear kind of what you can do, and so that's really why I'm proposing it. Its design is really just to make it clear for council and citizens kind of what your role is.
I'm gonna move that we adopt Proposition 6 with the correction as to the number of years.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Pedrati, seconded by Ms. Strzelecki, that we approve Proposition 6.
And I'm gonna clarify this because Cindy actually pointed it out. This does not include the fire chief or the police chief. That's in a different section of our charter. So this is talking about people that are in the chain of command below the city manager. Am I correct with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Discussion?
Yes, I just want to kind of throw this out there because I was thinking of it. After E, F, this would be F. No city official shall contract or cause to have contract with the city of Windcrest for monetary gain until 1 year after employment. That might be an ordinance, I know.
Yeah, that's something that you would do in an ordinance, and you gotta balance some other laws with that. But it is certainly something that you can address in an ordinance.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Can you define?
Can you clarify paragraph D, please?
Can I
Clarify which one?
paragraph?
Paragraph D.
D, Delta, okay.
What?
Review it.
Yeah, paragraph D essentially states for the citizens out there that neither the city council nor any of its members shall dictate to the city manager the appointment of any person to office or employment. No members of the city council shall interfere with the city manager in the performance of the duties of that office or prevent the city manager from exercising the city manager's own judgment in the appointment of officers and employees whose employment, appointment, and supervision are reserved by the charter for the city manager. And then it talks about, it allows council to inquire and seek information, and that is not interference. This is the kind of language that's generally used, the way a city manager, council form of government is supposed to be designed. I mean, it's traditional design, is the city manager acts like a buffer between the political tides that happen on council and city employees. You usually want to keep things going on in the council away from the city employees. The city manager gets paid to deal with you guys. That's basically how it's kind of designed. And so you let him deal with the employees, and if you don't like the way he's dealing with them, then you get rid of him. But that gives some level of comfort and protection to the employees that they're not there at the will of changing political tides. But what happens is if you take that power away and you control certain things that employees do. You take it away from him, he doesn't actually, I'm just referring to the city manager. The city manager doesn't have the authority to necessarily hire and fire individuals or discipline individuals, so they lack the ability to control certain things that they do. And so when you have problems, the city manager has, what they're gonna do is they're gonna point to the employee and say, look, this is what you gave me, I couldn't really do anything. And so by separating it this way, he's fully in control of them, but he's fully responsible. And B basically says you guys don't interfere with his ability to do that, and you run everything through him, and then he deals with the employees. That's what D is designed to do.
And we don't tell them who to hire.
Yeah, except for the ones that are specifically spelled out in the chart, and those stay.
Okay, my concern with paragraph D is that I feel like it deviates away from our home rule style of government.
It swings the pendulum more towards the home. Because you do policies, you pass ordinances. He does day-to-day things. Dealing with employees on a day-to-day basis, that's the city manager's job. And so it takes you out of that equation and makes him have to do it. But you hold him responsible for doing it. You funnel anything you want through him. Now, that doesn't stop you from inquiring as city council members in order to do your job and pass the right laws and figure out what the right policies are. You need data and you need information. And so you are not prohibited. I've seen some personnel manuals and other ordinances where they try and use language like this to say the city council can't talk to employees. And that's not true. You can inquire with information. You can gather data that you need to do your job. You can interact with employees all day long as you're not ordering them how to do their job. And that's kind of what this is designed to clarify. So your job, you individually, all 5 of you, don't need to be telling employees exactly what to do. And the thing is, I didn't really change much of D. Part of D was already there. So.
What part of D was changed?
I would have to look at exactly which red line it was. I believe I clarified the not giving direct instruction staff, but that you can inquire solely through the city manager. No, the part about inquiry for information, as long as you're not interfering with executive functions. Yeah, except for the purpose of inquiry investigations. City council members shall deal with the city staff solely through the city manager. And so it directs you to deal with him if you want something done. It's clear though, if you just want information, you want to know what the last budget was like or how much you spent on vendors or whatever, you can go straight to Mr. Hakala and inquire for that information, and he's got to give it to you. The city manager can't necessarily interfere with your inquiries. That's what it's designed to try and clarify. I may not be clarifying it well enough.
Any other questions or discussion?
Yeah, I have a question in paragraph B.
Yes, ma'am.
When it's talking about a stipend for a volunteer, is that to reimburse them for?
Yeah, it's reimbursement only.
Can we say that instead of stipend?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Where was that at?
The end of B.
The last sentence talks about volunteers who receive a stipend. That is the same as the stipend received by other similarly volunteers. So instead of the word stipend, put in reimbursement for expenditures.
A stipend, okay, who receives a
Stipend. What it really is saying is reimbursement.
But what it says is this subsection shall not apply to a volunteer who receives a stipend that is the same as the stipend received by other similarly situated volunteers.
But why would a volunteer receive a stipend?
Basically a reimbursement. So this language though, the thing is this language, you can change it, that's fine. But understand, this language doesn't create the stipend, it doesn't talk about the authority for stipend. It basically says if a stipend's been created somewhere else, and that stipend that was created somewhere else is being used by a volunteer, then this subsection doesn't apply to them. It
So
doesn't
they
actually.
they can be city manager with it, they don't have to wait a year before they're city manager because they got a stipend.
Yes, that's right.
Gotcha.
Okay,
We can still make it reimbursement if you want.
I think it just clarifies the intent.
Okay.
And
Okay, so replace the word stipend with reimbursement for expenses as a phrase?
yes,
Okay, but stipend is 2 times in that sentence.
right, both times.
Receives a reimbursement.
Reimbursement for
Is the same.
expenses.
So just, both times just the word stipend changed to reimbursement.
For expenses.
Or,
So it would read, this subsection shall not apply to a volunteer who receives a reimbursement for expenses. That is the same as the reimbursement for expenses received by other similarly situated volunteers.
okay.
Yeah, I mean,
And you accept the change, Mr. Petrarca?
Accept it, yes.
Okay, and obviously. All right, any other discussion?
None.
Okay, all those in favor of passing ordinance 6 as amended, raise your right hand. Opposed? Abstain, okay, that was 4-1. Ms. Flick abstained. Proposition 7.
Proposition 7. This clarifies, there are state law requirements that basically say if you have an ordinance that is for certain topics, it doesn't matter that your charter says they have to be passed in 2, you've got to pass them in 1. There are also certain times when a single ordinance, or a passage of the ordinance on a single reading is more efficient for staff and doesn't really detract from what the purpose of having the 2 readings is. The 2 readings is really designed to let the citizens know what's going on, and so a council can't slip something in on a single reading, and then boom, all of a sudden, you know, you're regulated in a way you didn't think you were regulated, and you didn't actually know to show up for the council meeting. So that's still preserved. It's just when you're dealing with calling elections, passing budgets, there are certain state law deadlines that you have to meet, else certain consequences happen. And so you normally don't want the 2 reading element. Like right now, we're having a 2 reading element on the ordinance for the charter, and we have to make sure we meet the deadline of February 15th, or else we miss the May election. Normally, you want to have the ability to do that, but the additions here are for certain things that they can be passed in 1, or they can be passed in 1, but only if you've already had public hearings on it. You know, something that lets the citizens know prior. And that's really the main reason for the change this proposed here. It also, it clarifies slightly with regard to your code of ordinances, which are your regulatory ordinances that you pass. When a prosecutor or an attorney has to take those ordinances, those codes into court, if we take it into court along with the charter, with this language, they basically get adopted automatically. They're taking judicial notice of it. And so that is something, 3.14 actually, is something that makes it easier for me as a lawyer. That's the reason.
We're all about that. Move.
I move that we adopt Proposition 7 as written.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Freslecki and seconded by Ms. Pedrati that we accept Proposition 7 as written. Discussion? None. All those in favor, raise your right hand. By vote, thank you, Council. 8.
This actually, going a little along the lines of putting the right administrative powers on the city manager, but it basically clarifies some questions that had come up previously. That I know, it's not, this one isn't imperative that it be included or passed, but it does clean up some confusion on things that had occurred in the past. The heading on 4.07, for example, would say passed by majority / plurality, and then the text said, you know, for its elected position, it passes by plurality. And that became confusing to some citizens. I got quite a few comments on that prior to us looking at the chart. So I tried to clean up some stuff like that. Your oath of office was also statutorily out of date. That's in there. Normally you don't put the oath, if it's a state law oath you have to take, you just say you take the oath that's required by state law. And you don't put the oath in there because state law tends to change, and then you gotta adopt your charter to change it when it happens. So, that's what these changes are for. You had already changed May to November, so I didn't have to make that change.
Every time I see somebody going to talk, he keeps talking.
I make a motion that we adopt Proposition 8, Section 4.01, Section 4.02, Section 4.03, Section 4.07, and Section 4.08 of the city charter.
A second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Turner, second was Ms. Flick. Any discussion? Those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you, council, 5-0. 9.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Mainly, and again, this one doesn't, there's no absolute necessity that this one be included, but I'm trying to clean up some of the language in there to clarify and bring it in conformity with some of the state law provisions. The city attorney office, a lot of times if there's a conflict that occurs for any reason, and I'll give you an example from one of my other cities, completely unrelated to my representation. Before I represented that city, I represented one of the council members in a private matter. And so then I was the city attorney and the city prosecutor, and when that council member got a speeding ticket, I was conflicted out. But usually when that happens, you don't want to have to go to council to ask for the authority to hire conflict counsel in order to step in that kind of situation. But this makes it subject to budgetary control by the council. It clarifies that and the city attorney's role with regard to municipal court. And I was asked, it said basically in the top that city council can remove me, for any reason, for a reason or no reason whatsoever, and the number. I was asked to put it in again and make it really, really clear that I can be removed for any reason whatsoever by a vote of 3. Technically, when the city council appoints a position such as the city attorney, it becomes a quote office, and there's some statutory language that basically says you can only remove for no reason or for a lack of confidence if you have a supermajority vote for that office. And this removes that from here. There's no problem with that because under the lawyer's ethical rules, if a majority doesn't want me as their lawyer, I'm not supposed to be their lawyer anyway. So, those are the changes.
Okay, and with that, I make a motion to adopt Proposition 9, Section 5.03, City Attorney.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Turner, seconded by Mrs. Brzezicki, that we approve Proposition 9. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. I vote thank you, council. Proposition 10.
Proposition 10 was really meant to allow the city and the city manager to make necessary adjustments when they need to come up and occur. With regard to the city secretary position, that's normally an appointed position. And so the city manager only has limited abilities to do certain things with the city secretary. you had put, your previous charter actually put certain job duties on the city secretary that aren't normal to put on the city secretary, especially in a charter. But being a small city, you know, lots of people wear different hats sometimes, and that's perfectly acceptable. But you need to be able to adjust and kind of go with the flow and decide what this particular situation needs at the time. And so I removed some of the, like, express duties that the city secretary is supposed to have, and basically put it back on the city manager and the city council to make any sort of job duty description adjustments through ordinance or policy at a later time. What this does is it gives you the full power and range to deal with the city secretary.
I move for adoption of Proposition 10. Shall sections 5.06 of the city charter be amended, change the authority of the office of city secretary, and change the procedure for appointment.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Shrezlecki, seconded by Mr. Turner, that we adopt Proposition 10. Discussion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0, thank you, council.
11 is very similar, just dealing with the municipal clerk. It updates it with state law.
I'm gonna move that we adopt Proposition 11.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Brody, seconded by Mr. Turner, that we adopt Proposition 11. Discussion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0, thank you, council. 12.
Proposition 12 is just, it's actually kind of a little-known thing, but it provides you the ability to enter, or clarifies your ability to enter into permits and franchises consistent with a specific section of the Transportation Code. That allows you to enter into franchises for private use on public right-of-ways.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes, sir.
Just one comment, this was gonna be up to date, like with all the, I know I saw the word telecommunications in there, but with all the new amendments with AT&T and the little mini cellular towers that are popping up now?
Technically, this is only adjusting one section of your franchise, the franchise section of your charter. The franchise section and the financial section of your charter probably needs more work, but it's not really what I was focusing on. I was thinking that that would be by the Charter Commission.
Understand.
I'm gonna move that we accept Proposition 12.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Pedrati, seconded by Mr. Archuleta, we accept Proposition 12 into discussion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you, council. 5-0. 13.
13, it cleans up your general legal section. Basically, it clarifies service of process. You had it in there inconsistent with state law, and just kind of the abilities for notice, legal notice, and providing notice of claims against the city.
Okay, I'm gonna move that we adopt Proposition 13.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Pedrati, seconded by Mr. Turner, we adopt Proposition 13. Discussion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0, thank you, council. 14.
Proposition 14.
No, one more.
No.
14.
14. Boundaries.
Boundaries. I will say that, well, go ahead.
Well,
Can I explain this?
The law changed significantly in 2017. And so it's not as clear, and it's not as well as a lot of citizens would like, or a lot of cities would like. And when you're dealing with annexations or disannexations, they're very bracketed, and there are lots of little exceptions and holes. And so what this does is it brings it in conformity with the current state law, and makes it so that if there are exceptions to certain things, you have the power to utilize them. It doesn't mean you will. You gotta adopt ordinances and stuff to allow for that. But it's an attempt to bring it into conformity with the current state law.
I'm gonna move that we accept Proposition 14.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Pedrati, second by Ms. Flick, that we Proposition 14. Only a comment I'd make, I did have someone who called and was very concerned about the fact that maybe Brian can answer this, is that you did take the language that said we would vote on annexation.
Yes, sir.
Could you explain that?
So what the change in 2017 says is for annexations, if someone's going to be annexed, Bear County is what's called a Tier 2 city now, and so we are by default, or Tier 2 county, so we are by default a Tier 2 city. As a result, for annexations, with certain exceptions that apply, you can't annex them unless they vote on it. It doesn't actually allow the citizens to vote on it. And so what this does is it allows council to take action when those exceptions come into play. And an example would be, you have a single one-track property owner that just wants you to, they may want services or utilities, they just want you to extend their boundaries just over them. You're not talking about a mass development or anything like that. Because the tract size has to be small. That's an exception that the council's allowed to do. You don't necessarily have to go to the electorate for a single tract owner who just wants to come into the city. But the state law prevents you from doing that for a single tract owner where the tract is huge. And so this changes it so that basically the state law procedure applies, but you have the ability to use the exceptions if you choose.
And part of this also came into being with the acquisition of the land that Rackspace is on, and I think there was some concern there was not a vote. If that were to happen again, would there be a vote?
Under the way this works in
the way it's worded now, if the same, let's just say that the land over Rackspace was still San Antonio. San Antonio decided to, I guess it's disannex, and we decided to annex. Would there be a vote?
No. There would only be a vote by the property owner.
By San Antonio, or by
Rackspace,
or whoever owned the property.
Or whoever owned the property, right?
And there would not be a required vote by the citizens to annex it.
That's correct.
Okay, that may be the concern of the person. So anyway, that's the only comment I had. Any other comments? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Wait, sit in.
So just to clarify, it's whoever's in the proposed area to be annexed or disannexed.
That's correct.
Those are the folks that get the vote.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Okay. I can't see you, Mr. Petrardi. I'm assuming you're voting.
I'm voting
yes.
for it.
Okay, all right. 5-0. 15, I think this is going to be the last one, the one we were waiting for.
Yes, sir.
Even 9 o'clock. That would be interrupting.
This one is not that important, but as I was going through it anyway, it just cleans up some of the language with regard to the transition. Whenever you transition from one charter to another, you have to have transition provisions in there. The changes that were made to the 2010 version were significantly more. This is one place where there was a big change if you went, but your 2015 Charter Commission took care of most of that. And so this is just little cleanups on consonant language and making sure the place designators for each place on the council were properly assigned.
So I move for adoption of Proposition 15, sections 10.4 and 11.01 of the city charter to be amended to clarify the procedures and change the transition provisions upon passage of charter amendments.
I second that.
Moved by Ms. Strzelecki, second by Mr. Turner, we approve proposition number 15, discussion. All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, it's 5-0. Thank you, council. All right. I believe we're done with that. Okay, ordinance,
Are you going to adopt the ordinance?
Yeah, that's where I was going with this. So do we adopt the ordinance then?
You approve the ordinance to move forward, yes, sir.
Okay, so then with item number 1, we'll review, discuss, and may take action on ordinance 2019, I'm sorry, that was, oh, that is it, yes, 2019-68, 9, ordering the special election to be held on May 4th on Proposition Charter Amendments, first reading.
I'm gonna move that we approve, and Cindy turned the page too fast, an ordinance, by the City Council of the City of Windcrest to order a special election to be held on May 4th, 2019, to consider amendments to the charter of the City of Windcrest, making provisions for the conduct of such special election and resolving other matters related to the conduct of such special election.
I second.
Okay, moved by Ms. Pedrati, second by Mr. Strzelecki, that we approve ordinance number 2019-6890. Discussion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. I vote. Thank you, council.
What was the vote?
5-0. Number 2, City Council review, discuss, and may take action on ordinance 2019-690, reestablishing staggered terms for all boards and commission, first reading.
I guess that's me too. Mayor, this is the one I was instructed to fix the terms that we had kind of gotten off on, and there's been some confusion over what the word term means and when it starts and stops. Terms are defined when they're created for your years, and then when you are appointed, you're appointed into certain terms. Those terms continue to run whether you're there or not. And so when you get into it, that prevents you from undoing the staggering by making the terms run from when they're appointed, or making the terms run from when they're, they sign their oath of office. So the only way to really fix it, and fix it for all of the charters, or all of the commissions and boards, is kind of this reestablishment ordinance. Technically what it does is it destroys and then automatically reestablishes each board and commission, so you're starting anew with the terms. But what you're starting anew with, by the time this second reading would come up, would basically be the individuals that you had appointed last time, or that you had reappointed last time. They're reappointed, but the staggered terms have been fixed. So they're in there for the proper terms as they're staggered. And that should also help avoid confusion in the future as to calculating and who goes in what spot.
I move for adoption of the first reading of ordinance number 2019-960, reestablishing staggered terms for all boards and commissions.
960
I think it's 690.
690.
I'll second that, whatever the number is.
Okay, moved by Mr. Strzelecki, second by Ms. Pedrati, that we approve Strzelecki.
No, you just
I
changed
didn't say
it.
this. All right, 219-690. Discussion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you, council.
5-0.
5-0, thank you. Item 3, City Council review to take action on ordinance 219-688, ordinance amending Charter Chapter 14 and 24 of the City Code of Ordinances, adding and discarding of tobacco products list, prohibited littering materials, adding a smoking prohibition in public parks and outdoor facilities, and imposing civil and criminal penalties. Second reading.
I'm going to make a motion that we adopt ordinance number 2019-688.
I second.
Moved by Ms. Fleck, seconded by Mr. Archuleta, that we adopt, that we take it, or that we accept ordinance 219-688. Discussion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0, thank you, council. Resolutions. City Council review, discuss, and may take action on resolution 2019-685R, calling for a special election to be held on May 4th, 2019, on propositions to decrease economic development EDC Type 4 sales tax and increase the sales tax for the Municipal General Fund. First reading. WDC may comment and take board action related to the approval of the resolution.
I'd like to make an amendment.
Okay.
like to amend it to say Windcrest Economic Development Corporation from instead of 0.5%, be 1/4%, and should be decreased, then increasing the sales tax to the general sales tax of the city from 1/4% to 3/8%. And the other one is on section 1. Section 1 there, fourth line, would reallocate 3/8% of the sales of used tax currently dedicated to the Windcrest Economic Corporation. And I want to remove that word general sales, and I want to put specifically the street maintenance fund, Fund 19, line 4116.
I know what it is, but I'm not even
Mr. Archuleta, there's a legal problem with that. With that there is a special tax force dedicated to street maintenance funds, and we're not using that particular procedure or process. That's why it's going into the general fund. When you actually dedicate it that way, that causes a problem on election code. So that's why it goes to the general fund, but everyone stated that the purpose is so they can be used for the streets. But when you dedicate it to a specific street, a dedicated street fund, that's the part that causes the problems.
Well, I guess my problem is, what I want to do is my intent is to have a forever plan. I want this money dedicated to the streets forever, because our roads are gonna need maintenance forever, and I don't want 10 years from now somebody to say, oh, it's a general fund, let's just take it out of the general fund.
There's actually, there's no way to do anything forever.
Oh, I know, but I understand that.
Yeah, but.
As long as I can.
What you can create a dedicated fund afterwards that you mandate yourself to fund. And it can come from this, but you can't put it in the ballot itself.
Would that be an ordinance or resolution?
That'd be an ordinance.
Okay, fair enough.
So what's your motion?
I'll stretch that and just then put the numbers in. From a resolution by the City Council of the City of Windcrest, Texas, to order a special election to be held on May 4th, 2019, to consider reducing the sales tax applicable to the Windcrest Economic Development Corporation from 1/4% to 1/8%, and should be applicable to the general states tax of the city from 1/4 and reduced from 3/8.
Okay, let me just make sure what everybody understands what you're saying. Not percent, 1/4 of a cent.
1/4 of a cent.
Okay, and then reduced to 1/8 of a cent.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we pass resolution 2019-685, calling for a special election on May 4th on propositions to decrease the EDC Type 4 sales tax and increase the sales tax for municipal general fund. First reading. Discussion.
So I just want us to be clear that this is not an increase in taxes to the citizens of Windcrest. These resources are already taxed. What's happening is that the money is just being moved.
Exactly.
Yeah, or I should say reallocated for other city requirements.
No, not for streets, because we can't do
Yeah.
it.
For infrastructure or what have you. Okay, I got it, thank you.
Okay. I have a question here, Ryan.
Yes.
For your clarification, because I think you explained to us that if we do this, we have to have a second proposition which gives the money to the city, right?
I think he has it, right?
Well, what I did was, you actually have two resolutions in your packet. You know, a 1A and a 1B.
Right.
I have double, triple checked with the state. I have a contact in the state comptroller's office, the legal department, and I went over various things with him. The conservative advice is that you pass the option B resolution that I provided you, which breaks it up into two propositions. The first proposition decreases the amount, and the second proposition gives that money, increases the amount that's already there to the state.
Okay.
The option A, though, it does it in one proposition. That's the less conservative advice. There is some legal support that it is a proper way to do it, but it's not as clear cut. And so it's up to you which one you want to do and kind of how you want to risk it. There's a risk associated with each one.
Well, and here's my thing. If we do the one that you think is the more conservative,
Yes, ma'am.
and we take it from A and give it to B in two questions, right?
Yes.
So, yes, I agree that it should come from A, but no, I don't think it should go to B. We lose that money.
Yes,
Am I right?
You are right.
Okay, so basically, if we vote to do this, and this city loses $250,000 in revenue, they're gonna blame us. Okay, got everybody understand that? Okay, that's all I wanna say.
Now, to clarify, Mr. Archuleta, I believe you read from and amended option A,
Yes.
which is the single proposition, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I wanna make sure I know which one we're voting on, or which one we're voting on. So it would be option A, with Mr. Archuleta's amendments. It's a single proposition. There is legal support to say that is a legal way to do it. It's just not as clear cut as the conservative advice to break it into two.
It is also of note that the EDC, although, as you said so appropriately, Mr. Ryan, that nothing is forever, the EDC is taking action to support the roads in the city of Windcrest.
That was gonna be my comment, and that they're gonna come back at their February 23rd meeting with a proposal related to streets and what they can do under the EDC rules.
Let's table this till the EDC meeting. Fair enough?
Okay, so
I would draw a motion at this time.
Okay. That's good, because I don't know that I got all those
But
changes.
that's why we pay Ryan the middle
Yeah,
bucks.
that's right, okay. All right, council and EDC, the last item that I have is the city council shall consider, or I guess, do we need to make a motion to table, or do we just no take no action?
Just take no action.
Okay. City council would consider accept the acceptance of the police chief's retirement notification. So we are in receipt of a notification from Chief Blue that he is intended to retire effective January, midnight on January 27th, I believe. Right?
Yes, sir. It's technically listed as an action item. He has the right to retire one way or the other.
We can't make him now.
So if we vote no, he still can.
Yeah, he's still retired. But if you want to take any action on it, you can, but really no action is necessary.
Okay. Then no action shall be, unless somebody wants to take action. Seeing none, okay. We have finished our executive session. There are any items that we need to take action out of the executive session? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second. Mr. Strati, Mr. Turner, discussion, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you, EDC, it's been a long meeting, but a very important meeting.